suddenly stop. Hospitals, factories, schools, and power plants, they all depend on you. No matter the weather, emergency, or time of day, you're the ones who get it done. At Grainger, we're here for you with professional-grade industrial supplies. Count on real-time product availability and fast delivery. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Coming up next, we're speaking to the author of a new book. It's called Uptime, A Practical Guide to Personal Productivity and Well-Being, written by Laura Mae Martin, Google's productivity expert. That's next, right after this.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Sources tell Bloomberg Shari Redstone, the controlling shareholder of film and TV giant Paramount Global, has reached a tentative agreement to sell her stake in the company to David Ellison's Skydance Media. We're keeping an eye on Levi Strauss shares after ours. Levi now up by 5%. It reported higher than expected sales and profit in the first quarter amid market share gains and lowered costs. Stocks ended the day mixed. Dow Industrial slumped 43 points, a drop today of 0.1%. We had the S&P up by 5.5 points, up 0.1%. NASDAQ was up 37, a gain there of 0.2%. The bond market did rebound from session lows, with Jay Powell only reiterating the Federal Reserve's wait-and-see approach before policymakers decide to embark on interest rate cuts. 10-year, 4.34%, the 2-year, 4.67%. Spot gold up 0.8%, $22.98 for an ounce of the precious metal. While West Texas Intermediate crude was up 0.5%, $85.62 for a barrel of WTI. Again, recapping, stocks ended the Wednesday session mixed. The Dow was lower by 0.1%. S&P up today by 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you for that update, Charlie. Appreciate it. Well, if you were to spend an entire Saturday binging old episodes of your favorite TV show while snacking on popcorn, Carol,
I've done it.
what would the show be?
Don't judge me. I'm not going to tell you.
All right. Maybe throw a nap in there, too. Throw a nap in there, too.
The bear. Remember the bear?
Yeah, the bear. That's a good one.
You were like, finally.
Would you call it one of the most productive days of your life?
I don't know if it was productive, but I really loved it.
Okay, well,
very happy.
Laura Mae Martin did just that, and yes, she writes in her new book that watching old episodes of Heartland, which I had to Google, I didn't know that was a show, for 10 hours was indeed one of the most productive days of her life. She should know what's productive because she's the executive productivity advisor at Google, also the author of the new book, Uptime, A Practical Guide to Personal Productivity and Well-Being. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. So, Laura, please tell us, how in the world is binging something on Netflix or a streaming service all day productive?
I think the old definition of productivity is how much are you churning out, how much are you checking off your list, but when you think about it in a holistic sense, if your intention was to relax and spend a day doing something you love, and you set the time aside to do that, and you executed on it well, then I would argue that that was a productive day in the long term.
Interesting. I love this. I mean, take a step back and tell us, because you carved out a niche for yourself, certainly, over at Google in terms of productivity. Tell us about how that came to be and the kind of things you were doing for workers there at the company, and kind of taking something like, were you telling employees, go home, go binge, come back in 24 hours, like, help us through.
Yeah. So I think when I started, I was in sales, and this job didn't exist, and I was really just managing my own email, my own time, my own energy in a way that was making me productive. And Google has a great program where you can teach other Googlers anything. And so I started teaching an email training about how to use your inbox like a dashboard and manage all of your tasks. And that eventually led to me coaching people one-on-one and working with executives, and eventually starting productivity at Google. So it was something that people were already doing and needed more organization around, and that's what led to it.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those executives, because arguably the people who are creating, among the most valuable companies in the world, like, they're productive.
Yes.
Look what they did.
Yes.
They took a project at Stanford and made it into a over $1 trillion company.
Mm-hmm.
What were they doing wrong, though?
I think so. A lot of times when I'm working with an executive, it's at maybe a turning point. So it's just having that objective lens to help look at, oh, you're taking on a new team, or now you're working globally, or you have a different role than before. And so this is a good time to take a look at priorities and responsibilities and how you're thinking about your time. So many times I'm there just to kind of ask questions and prompt and create systems between a chief of staff and an assistant and how everyone works together. But the great thing is, like you said, all of them are already productive in a lot of ways. So I'm learning from each of those sessions and then spreading some of those across the company.
There's being productive kind of with your work life, there's being productive with your personal life. We have Michael, a listener, writing in, wondering if people would improve productivity by scheduling times for their personal goals as well. So how did you factor in that side of it?
I actually don't recommend people come up with personal goals and work goals because there's only one you. There's only one pie of time.
So depressing.
No, it's good because it helps you think about, I'm one holistic person with one set of time and things I can focus on. So if I have a personal goal, I have to make room for that at work. If I'm taking on more at work, I need to make room for that in my personal life. And so, it's a trade-off mindset.
Every decision impacts everything in your world, right?
Exactly. And saying yes to anything is saying no to something else implicitly. So you have to figure out what that is at all times. And so, when those personal changes come up, if you're moving your family across the country, something at work might need to take a back seat.
So do the heads of the company reach out to you and say, hey, we need some help with something?
I do training for everyone at the company, so all the way down to new employees to executives. So.
Well, what's your advice? Because Tim, you and I talk about this a lot. You have a young family. My daughter's older at this point, but I mean, it does feel like we live, we have full jobs, to say the least.
Yeah.
We commute here in New York City. There's just a lot that comes at you. I mean, how do you kind of work with somebody, and how do you help them kind of be more productive in all aspects of their life?
A lot of times the first question I ask is, if you had an extra hour of your day, what would you do with it? And what that gives me that information of what I call kind of the cusp, what you want to be doing but you're not quite getting to. And so it's usually something like, I wish I could spend more time with my family, or I work on this bigger picture project, or I've really been wanting to learn how to sew.
Well, that's my question. Do people who you ask that question to ever say they want to spend more time working?
Sometimes it's I have a team and I want to focus on more big picture items.
They like Lori's going to report back to my boss.
Sleep, spend more time with my family, exercise.
It can be just what they've been meaning to get to, and it usually just means what they're just out of reach.
Well, it's funny, there's a book I read, Stu Schwartzman of Blackstone, and a colleague of ours, Jason Kelly, we talked about, and there's a thing in his, in what he said is
What It Takes is the book.
What It Takes, thank you. But he was like, think big, that don't kind of get caught up in the tedious small things. If there's something kind of similar but on a bigger scale that's going to have a bigger impact, don't waste your time on that little stuff. Go big. And I wonder if you kind of incorporate that thinking into how you be more productive.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people get in the weeds again of if I'm a salesperson, how do I figure out how to make more calls per day? But the reason I recommend even incorporating downtime into your schedule is because that's when you come up with those big picture ideas. I just talked to someone yesterday who said, my boss should pay me for my hour run in the morning because that's when I contribute most to work. And so while we feel like it's all about how much we're doing little, it has to be also, how are we thinking big?
I like that. I think a lot of that has, I don't know if you've noticed this, but Laura, there's been this shift since the pandemic. I feel like that it's much less about.
No, she hasn't noticed it.
But you don't know what I'm going to say.
Okay, fine. I thought I know. I think I knew.
It's not productive. You know what's not productive for me is.
I just think I know. Okay. Go ahead.
Is this idea of productivity doesn't necessarily mean butts and seats at the office.
Right.
So it's the idea of actually, if you create a good product, does it matter if you're actually working from 3 to 5 p.m. or you need to go pick up your kid?
Yeah, and that's why I tell managers that January to March should be the new 9 to 5. You need to be thinking about macro goals and how people are reaching them, because some people,
I like that.
Yeah, people in the pandemic realized that they like waking up super early, working for a bit, then having a workout, or waking up late and working into the night. And that's such a big part of productivity, is your own natural rhythms. Not all time slots are created equal. And so if you figure out when you work the best, you should be able to honor that as much as possible versus the traditional schedule.
Well, you guys in the tech world, and we had folks that we talked to during the pandemic and said, listen, we've been working from home and flexible and hybrid and all this stuff for years. We have a story that's on the Bloomberg, most read, has to do with Steve Cohen, big hedge fund investor, know him well, but he, our audience knows him well, saying that he thinks the 4-day work week is coming. How do you guys, if an employee says to you, listen, I'd be much more productive if I work 3 or 4 days, just jam it all in. How do you approach something like that?
I can't speak for how Google as a whole is thinking of that, but I think that when you're honoring flexibility in general, that should be something that you're thinking about. If somebody says, again, my goals are from January to March, can I accomplish those in 4 days? And is that something that, unless it's interfering with your ability to meet on Fridays or something like that that affects collaboration, then it should be considered because, it's not about the hours.
Did you see a shift at Google in your years there? There was this whole idea early on with Google where, I don't even know if they still have this, about 20% time where you can just dedicate a fifth of your time to whatever project you want to do. Have they pulled back on that a bit?
This program that I created was my 20% project. So it's really about finding your passion and your need and merging that with the need of someone in the company. So clearly here there was a need for an organized, version of productivity at Google, and that's what I spent my time on.
There's one thing in the book, and it says one component of peak productivity is having a good inventory of everything you're not doing yet.
What does that mean?
That is equally as important as everything you are doing. So in other words...
Like a to-do list?
A to-do list, but what happens is people when I've studied to-do lists and how people use them...
I make them all the time, but they frustrate that.
Well, exactly, because you probably have something that's due by 5 p.m., and then you're also like, I should do this before the summer. And then you have just a list that's kind of merging all those things together. And so in the book, I talk about having a list of everything you possibly could do versus everything you realistically will do and keeping inventory of those separate.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking about the way my wife and I figure out calendars and stuff. It's like the Google Calendar, it's the whiteboard in the kitchen, it's like texting each other. I mean, what do you do at home?
Yeah, so I do have a Google Calendar with my husband. I invite him when he needs to pick up or I need to pick up, and if it's not on the calendar, it's not true.
It's not going to happen.
20 seconds left here. Somebody wants to start thinking about being more productive in their life holistically. What should be one step that they should take, just quickly?
Start planning for the day after the night before. So making an hour-by-hour plan of how you plan to spend your day tomorrow before you go to bed.
All right, add it to your to-do list, Carol.
I kind of do lists the night before.
You know what you need on your to-do list?
I just...
To make a to-do list.
So look at my computer. There's lots of stickies all over it.
I can't see anything on your computer.
Good luck with the book.
Thank
this is
you.
fun. Laura Mae Martin. Her new book is, first of all, she's Executive Productivity Advisor at Google. Her new book, Uptime, A Practical Guide to Personal Productivity and Well-Being.
Let's get a check of the latest world and national news. For that, we go to Amy Morris, New Bloomberg 99.1 News in D.C. Hey, Amy.
ACM, Taiwan's strongest earthquake in a quarter century leveled dozens of buildings on the eastern side of that island, killing at least a dozen people, disrupting semiconductor production at some of the world's leading chip makers. Bloomberg's Adrian Kennedy explains from Taiwan.
It struck in the east of Taiwan, in Hualien, which is relatively underpopulated compared to the western part of the island. This is an island of 23 million people, which is critical to world chip supplies. It's a major technology powerhouse, but the majority of that is on the west of the island.
Still, Bloomberg's Adrian Kennedy reports the quake did force Taiwan Semiconductor and some smaller rivals to move staff and evacuate facilities. The White House is responding to the aftermath of a meeting to celebrate the holy month of Ramadan, where a Palestinian-American doctor who spent time in Gaza walked out in protest. Tahir Ahmad is an emergency-based physician in Chicago, telling ABC that he doesn't think the White House has done enough to protect the people of Gaza. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says the president is vowing to continue to press Israel to do more to protect aid and aid workers.
The president and the vice president have been in communication with the community regularly since October. And this is something that they asked. They asked for a private meeting, a working meeting, if you will. And so we understand how this community is feeling. It is a deeply painful moment for many in the Arab and Muslim communities.
And now we are learning President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are set to speak tomorrow. Federal prosecutors growing frustrated with the Trump-appointed judge who is overseeing classified documents case in Florida. Special counsel Jack Smith said in a filing that the judge's understanding of some key legal issues in that case are fundamentally flawed. Global news 24 hours a day whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
Every Bloomberg radio show.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week.
Every Bloomberg podcast.
Welcome to the Odd Laws Podcast.
This is the big take.
Every Bloomberg news headline.
Now to a Bloomberg News exclusive.
Historic moves in the Treasury market.
Catch every moment of Bloomberg radio inside your car.
This is a joy.
The new Bloomberg Business app, now featuring Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Download it free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Bloomberg Radio. Context changes everything.
This is the Bloomberg Black Business Beat. Shamina Singh is founder and president of the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, an initiative pushing for economic and financial equity around the world. As a child of immigrants, Singh grew up with first-hand knowledge of some of the challenges people in underserved communities face, especially when it comes to starting a business. In her experience, a lot of people aren't looking to get rich. They're just hoping to get by.
Most entrepreneurs that we have found are looking for stability. We call them stability entrepreneurs. They want to make a good living, they want to hire good staff around them, and they want to grow in a consistent and responsible way. And that's a little bit of a different framework than I think folks think about when we think about entrepreneurs and small business owners. We need to meet them where they are.
Through its research, the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth is able to offer help and tools for exactly the type of problems people from underserved communities face. I'm Bloomberg's Justin Milliner on the Black Business Beat.
Now your ideas don't have to wait. Now they have everything they need to come to life. Dell Technologies and Intel are creating technology that loves ideas, loves expanding your business, evolving your passion. We push what technology can do. So great ideas can happen right now. Find out how to bring your ideas to life at Dell.com. Welcome to Now.
Interactive Brokers charges USD margin loan rates from 5.83% to 6.83%, rated the lowest margin fees by stockbrokers.com. Their clients can also earn extra income by lending their fully paid shares of stock. Join Interactive Brokers clients from 200 plus countries and territories to invest in stocks, options, futures, funds, and bonds on 150 global markets. Rates subject to change. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare.
Pop culture is always evolving, and those changes impact our lives in ways that are both visible and not so obvious. I'm Lucas Shaw, and I cover the business of pop culture for Bloomberg. My job is to uncover how entertainment is changing and explain what that means for you. Because context changes how you see things, how you change things. Context changes everything. Start exploring my coverage and more at Bloomberg.com.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest Balance of Power podcast, we talk with Charlie Cook, the founder of the Cook Political Report, about the weaknesses facing both Joe Biden and Donald Trump in this campaign.
I don't think that there is a big group of people wearing Haley jerseys that are, run around in the political process. It's just more people that aren't for Trump or people that aren't for Biden. And, there's going to be defections on each side, or more likely where they just simply don't vote. And that's actually, one of the bigger problems for Democrats is with young voters, with Latinos, with African Americans, is, they're worried about defections, but they're also worried about a lack of enthusiasm and turnout.
Hey, Charlie, we were lucky to have you on Super Tuesdays. You sat at the table here reminding us that it was not very super, that things were foregone, that we were looking at an inevitable equation, in this case with two candidates nobody seemed to really even want. I wonder now, as we enter April, and looking at, you mentioned our poll, Bloomberg and Morning Consult, our swing state poll showing Donald Trump winning the majority of them. Is this thing over, the general, that is?
I don't think it's over, but I think it's definitely uphill for President Biden. I think it'd be foolish for anybody to say Biden cannot win. But if you were just totally not the factors that are arguing for a Biden win, politically speaking or electorally speaking, and for a Trump win, it's really, really, really uphill. And and as you said, people, they should first of all ignore national polls. I mean, they're good for directional. Is Smith gaining or Jones losing?
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Balance of Power podcast. Listen on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Turned out to be a mixed Wednesday for the U.S. equity market, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average lower. S&P, NASDAQ, they're both higher. The bond market rebounded from session lows, with Jay Powell only reiterating the Fed's wait-and-see approach before policymakers decide to embark on interest rate cuts. S&P today up 5, a gain of 0.1%. Dow Industrials down 41, a decline of 0.1%. The NASDAQ Composite Index up 37, up today by 0.2%. 10-year 4.34%. The 2-year 4.67%. Spot gold up $19 the ounce, up 0.8%.